Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Pruett. I'm here on behalf of the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance. For those of you who don't know who we are standing here today in opposition of House Bill 243. There are several reasons for this. The crux of the argument, and I'm going to try and hurry because I know there's a lot of people here that want to speak. When they look at the statement of purpose on House Bill 243, they say that they're trying to clarify the code and move the code around and all that. And that's fine. That's not an issue. The problem is that it does far more than that. It strips rights away from people that currently have it. The current Idaho code stated that any city, county, or state official has the right to carry without a permit. And then there's another provision in there that says any publicly elected official. The mantra seems to be that they're just removing it from you guys. The 105 people, that reside here during the session, they're removing it from you guys. However, it's far more than that. Our estimates are that up to 30,000 people currently have permitless carry in the state of Idaho under the current code, because any city, county, or state official has that, plus any publicly elected official also has that provision. And so we're standing here today to say that moves us in the wrong direction. We don't have an issue with trying to redefine some things and moving the code around to make it flow better. That's fine. The problem is we are removing people's rights, and that's not the direction we need to go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Other questions? Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Greg. So I understand your argument. I understand the perspective. If we were to take that portion of the legislation out, that language out, would your group stand in support of this particular piece of legislation?
No, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Crane, for the question. There are some other issues. I'm saying that's the crux of our argument on why that it should. There's some other clarifications. If you look on page 1, and Mr. Moore talked about this briefly on lines 32 through 39. He talked about baseball bats and some other issues. Okay, on line 37, any other weapon, device, instrument, material, or substance that is intended by the person to be readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury falls under the definition of deadly weapon, which also falls under a concealed weapon. So if I carry a screwdriver intended to harm someone, and that's what I want to use for self-defense, do I now have to have a concealed weapons permit just to carry that screwdriver? Because that's what it says under the definition, and the attorneys we've talked to. So there's that. There's some. We were told today by some attorneys that it actually expands the mental health background check beyond what the federal scope already is. So there's definitely some other things, but again, I know my time's limited here, and I wanted other people to have a chance. So I addressed mostly just the taking away of permitless carry from those individuals that already have it.
Follow, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Pruett. So if we address these issues, would you stand in support of the legislation, or are you in opposition to the legislation because your legislation was not heard?
No, absolutely not. If all the issues that we would like to see addressed were addressed, we would absolutely support it. And I already told you, I don't have an issue moving the code around and making it flow better. That's not something anybody here really opposes.
Follow, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Pruett. So do you have a handout typed up for us as members of the committee to look at? This section, this line, this needs to be changed, this needs to be changed. Do you have that prepared for the committee? Could you hand that out?
We can't hand that out today. We have some provisions and amendments prepared on the qualifications as far as who can carry without a permit. We have some amendments like that ready, but on some of these other issues, we don't have them addressed yet. They talked that you can do this in layman's terms. The problem is when you look at House Bill 243, and we've had this issue, people keep contacting us saying, hey, is this in the original code or not in the original code? And we're still trying to wrap our heads around what was actually changed, what wasn't changed. And so we're still digging through that, trying to do the best we can to figure out what amendments we would propose. Thanks. Representative Crosty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pruett, along the lines of some of what Representative Crane was asking, would you support a piece of legislation that brought all of the stakeholders to the table to work at a good concealed weapons piece of legislation?
Sure, we would love to sit down with anybody and talk with anybody regarding concealed weapons legislation. That just didn't seem to really happen. So we weren't invited to the table. Representative Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pruett, this handout was given to us by the presenter of the bill, Representative Boyle. Have you been Do you have this?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nielsen, no. In fact, I kind of sat back there and thought, man, that'd be nice for the public to have so we could all figure out what was going on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Nielsen.
May I suggest you get a copy of this, and then you can run it through your processes and even help a guy like me with your interpretation of it to come forward and possibly give us more information. Thank you.
Anything that comes before this committee is public, so it is available to you now. Now it's been presented, so
Thank you.
Maybe Mr. Moore could get some copies for everybody. Travis Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman, and members of the committee. Thank you for taking the time here. I know that the time is short, so I won't review some of the points that have already been brought up. But I'm Travis Thompson. I'm from Bonner County, Idaho, and I actually came down just for today for this hearing. And I stand opposed to 243. I spent a tremendous amount of time listening to all of the talking points that were going around about this, and then I spent time trying to find the answers to those questions, and I found that the answers to the questions weren't the same as what the talking points made them out to be. I appreciate Representative Windrow's questioning, and I actually went down that same road, and I did find an answer. I don't know if it's appropriate to bring up that answer here, but it just seems to be that there's a lot going on with this. There's a process, so on and so forth. But what the NRA is trying to do with this bill, and what the talking points and things that were brought up to promote this bill over another permitless carry bill, raised a little bit of concerns for me. But anyway, a couple of the things that we're looking at is they're trying to clean up the bill, but it doesn't appear to really clean the language up. It removes permitless carry, constitutional carry, from a large group of people, and we feel that it's a move in the wrong direction. It puts the NRA in a position to train the people that they remove the rights from. The definition of weapon isn't clear. When you change it to the intent to harm, it could be any tool or instrument. To me, it doesn't define it better. It actually broadens it. So I don't want to take any more time because there's other people that want to speak out. But I appreciate you guys taking the time. And if anybody wants to ask me any questions about the research that I found, I'd be happy to answer it.
Other questions? Thank you. Wayne Hoffman. Be followed by Jeff Wright.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Wayne Hoffman, President of the Idaho Freedom Foundation. I think I've been in front of your committee a lot this session. I apologize for taking so much of your time. House Bill 243 has some good elements, and it also has some problematic elements. It's a long bill. I won't get into all the details, but I want to just highlight a couple of things. So on page 1, lines 26 to 28, the provision dealing with the carrying of weapons, it says, the provisions of this chapter regulating the carrying of weapons must be strictly construed as to give maximum scope to the rights retained by the people. That's good language. I'm not really sure what the real world impact of the change will be, but it's certainly a good language. You've already heard about the issues relative to public officials. It's important to remember that we're not just talking about legislators and county commissioners. You're also talking about precinct committee people who today have the right to carry without Republicans, Democrats, whatever, they're actually elected officials, and so therefore the permitless concealed carry applies to them, and you should keep in mind the impact that'll have. One of the couple of sticky areas that we've highlighted also apply to page 10, lines 32 through 35. It says that an instructor must provide a copy of the syllabus and written description of the course of fire used in a qualifying handgun course that includes the name of the individual instructing the legal portion of the course to the sheriff upon request. There's no such demand in the existing code. I think there are other ways you could approach getting to what you're trying to achieve without putting the burden on the marketplace and the instructors and potentially compromising the people that are taking the course. And then finally, on page 4, lines 21 through 27, there's language adding to 183302 that says when a person is applying for a license to carry concealed weapons, the state police must conduct a national fingerprint-based background check, and so on. The current language only says the state police shall conduct a national fingerprint-based check. The new language expands, it seems, for looking for health issues in addition to a person's criminal history, and that's a bit concerning to us as well. Finally, I would say, and you've heard some allusions to it already, I think you have a bill, House Bill 889, that deserves some additional conversation. It's a good piece of legislation and goes in the right direction, but in addition to that, you do have a problem with the state constitution. The state constitution has delineated it better than it was when it was written in 1890, but in 1978, giving the legislature the ability to regulate concealed carry doesn't do any favors. And I think you could easily amend the state constitution to allow what you already have for with regard to open carry, and that's permitless constitutional carry in the state of Idaho. With that, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Other questions? Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Jeff Wright, followed by Jennifer Lantos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jeff Wright. I am a researcher, analyst, and an author. And I just had, I hope in just a few minutes here, I'd kind of convey a sense of outrage that I think many of the citizens have here with the introduction of House Bill 243 and a lot of things that have gone on in this session with regard to concealed carry. The information I'm about to convey comes from the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, and compiled quite a bit of information from that in the U.S. Census. One of the most interesting things you find is that the United States is the #1 nation in the world when it comes to ownership of firearms in the population at 91 per 100. 91 firearms for every 100 people in the population. However, where do you think we fall in violent intentional homicides against all 218 countries of the world? We fall at 111. If you take out the top 12 metro cities in the United States, in blue states, in blue cities with blue states that have the most aggressive gun regulation in the country, we drop almost to the bottom of the 218 countries in violent intentional homicides. That should tell you something about the nature of having concealed carry bills. What concealed carry and what most gun restrictions mean is you are actually causing more death. As John Lott pointed out in his book, More Crime, More Guns, Less Crime. This has been true since day one. That's why the old adage of an armed society is a polite society was invented. What we need to be doing is going in exactly the opposite direction, which, as Mr. Hoffman pointed out, is full constitutional carry. There's 5 states that have it now. They don't have any problems. Vermont's had it since 1791. That's called Vermont-style carry. If you look at all the statistics and you look at the U.S. Census data, in 1920, there was 6.8 intentional homicides per 100,000 of population. Today, there's 4.7. Yet in 1920, the number of guns per household or number of guns per population was 48 guns for every 100 of population. And as I said, today it's 91. So we almost doubled the number of guns, and we have a lower homicide rate than we had in 1920. So, and that's consistent with all the statistics that you see in the UN data. If you go across all the countries that have the most gun control and the least amount of guns, they have the most violent homicide rates. Honduras is number 1, 57 per 100,000 of population, with less than half the number of guns in the population that the United States have. The problem is not the guns, and that's what we have to start getting a grip on. The problem is culture, the problem is behavior. We need to stop dealing with the object. We need to start dealing with the rights of the people to keep and bear arms and to carry at will. And you'll find that if you remove all these restrictions, you get rid of concealed carry, we're going to be much better off as a nation. The #1 county in the country for household firearms is Dallas County. Guess what the lowest homicide rate in the United States for any county is? Dallas County. These are not coincidences, and they're not statistics that are unknowable. It's out there for anybody to see. I'll stand for questions from the committee. I would advocate this bill going no farther in a complete rewrite, as Mr. Hoffman suggested, of Article 1, Section 11 from 1978, to go back to constitutional carry and get away. We've learned in a century of data what we should be doing versus what we are doing. It is an irrational, unreasonable, and illogical discussion that is going on with regard to concealed carry. And I, for one, am outraged by what has been going on for several years in the legislature with regard to constitutional carry. Thank you, and I'll stand for questions.
Representative Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you here, and thanks for coming. I have read your book, and I've got your book, and there's a section, I think, on constitutional provisions for gun rights and that type of thing. My question goes to you this. You're stating that in places where there is prohibitions applied by cities and et cetera, for gun control, why are they, when the facts are so clear from, I think it was Vermont you stated, and various other places where they've had and abide by the Second Amendment very strictly, so to speak, what causes these entities, these government entities, to think otherwise in your research?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nielsen, I think it's we've developed over the past century a lot of mythologies when it comes to guns, and I think that those mythologies are based on a lot of emotional positions that are not objective and based on the data. And over time, as the data has become more and more evident, that hasn't changed the mythologies. You can go, there's many areas, and particularly when it comes to guns, I think that mythologies, once they stick for hard for a long time, and they're hard to break. And until people actually go out and look at the data and be objective about the data and see what it tells them truthfully, these emotional arguments, like I said, I believe the debate is over. The data, if you look at the data, the debate is over. What we have is an argument that's going on that I believe is irrational, unreasonable, and illogical. And that's why you get these laws in areas which then seem to be counterintuitive to the actual outcome that the laws were intended to invoke.
And follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. It almost appears to me that it's a fear of what might happen with the guns instead of understanding the issue. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair. Representative Nielsen, I think that's correct. Yes, it is irrational and emotional. You know, when lightning strikes, I mean, it's just like if you look at the statistics on intentional homicides with rifles. Every year there's several dozen more deaths caused by hammers and clubs than there are all types of rifles in this country. Yet look what has happened with assault rifles and rifles of different kinds over the years. when nothing happens with hammers and clubs, even though there's several dozen more deaths every single year with those devices over the gun. Again, it's not about the type of weapon, it's not the availability of weapons. It is the culture and the behavior that we refuse to deal with by transferring our attention to the object.
Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Winthrop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, isn't it true, however, I respect the data that you provide in your interpretation, but I've just scanned the web and several sites about gun violence actually purporting the opposite of what you've just purported. The National Violence Policy Center Research Investigative Analysis Advocacy talk about 30,000 Americans die in gun suicides, homicides, and accidental shootings every year. So I guess my question to you is, isn't it true that we can interpret data in different ways or frame it in different ways? But
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wright.
Representative Woodrow, the 30,000 in a population of 314 million translates to 4.7 deaths per 100,000. Okay? Yes, and so if you compare that, you have to look at it by the numbers. Yes, 30,000 as a standalone number sounds like a lot until you compare it on a per capita basis to all the other countries out there. Okay? I mean, several thousand, when lightning strikes, how many people a year does lightning kill in this country? Well, it kills almost half of the number of people that are killed with bats and clubs. There's all kinds of reasons for death, and some of them are tragic, some of them are unfortunate. But when lightning strikes, we don't pass a law on those events. And some of these events that people focus on, one problem is the media attention. Okay? Things are so much more visible now than they were 100 years ago, simply because of media. And I think that's why they're very conscious in people's minds. And the more tragic the situation, the more conscious it is in people's minds. But that doesn't change the nature of what the statistic tells us about what actually happens in the population and what is the most dangerous and why it is the most dangerous versus like I said, again, the object versus the behavior. Does that help?
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wright, I'd like to propose a question to you of this vein. In the U.S. Constitution, Article or Amendment number 2, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Then when we go to the Idaho Constitution, and that's the state I'm concerned about because that's where we live, is there a discrepancy between these two in your mind? What the Idaho Constitution says and what the U.S. Constitution says?
Mr. Chair. Representative Nielsen, absolutely. Since Article 1, Section 11 was entered into the Constitution, there's been a direct discrepancy because the regulation of concealed weapons, again, when you look at the statistics, is, I look at it this way, okay? I walk, as we've discussed with the problem about going from city to city, and I'm walking out, if I had my coat on, and I walk across the city line, and until I walk across the city line, I can have my coat over my weapon, and that's fine. As soon as I walk across the city line, and if I don't pull my coat back, I'm now violating the law. That's simply absurd. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And for a law-abiding citizen, you have all the restrictions on the books that you need with regard to the carrying, with who can own and carry a weapon with regard to convicted felons and violent offenders and all those things that are out there. But when it comes to law-abiding citizens, there should simply be no difference at all in open carry versus concealed carry for every and any law-abiding citizen.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Representative.
Then it comes to this to me. Now, I'm a great lover of the Second Amendment, no question about it, okay? But when it comes to a question of law, which is the law in Idaho that is binding? The Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution or the Constitution of the state of Idaho?
Well, that's simple. Since it pertains, it's in pursuant to the Constitution under Article 6. It means that the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution takes precedence over the Idaho Constitution in this condition.
Thank you for that clarification in Article 6.
Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you.
Jennifer? Followed by Mitchell Jensen. We are 15 minutes overdue on the House floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Landheis, and on behalf of the Idaho Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence, we oppose HB 243. The Idaho Coalition is a statewide membership organization comprised of 23 community and tribal domestic violence shelters and over 60 organizations. In any given 24-hour period in our state, 519 victims and their children seek shelter and services in an attempt to flee from domestic violence. In 1 year, shelter programs received over 11,000 calls on their hotline and met nearly 12,000 requests for services such as counseling and advocacy and emergency shelter. We know nationwide that domestic violence is the #1 cause of injury to pregnant women and the #1 cause of injury to women ages 15 to 44. We also know across the United States that an estimated 3 women and 7 children are killed at the hands of their perpetrator every single day. In 2014, there were 10 domestic violence homicides here in Idaho. In 2013, there were 14. In 2012, 10. And in 2011, an astonishing 22 domestic violence-related homicides. Many of these domestic violence-related deaths were committed with handguns. Of the 10 related domestic violence deaths that occurred in 2014, 6 of them were committed with handguns. We know that the mere presence of a gun in the house of a domestic violence victim increases her risk of being seriously harmed or killed by her perpetrator. And the dangerous link between domestic violence and firearms is clear, with one nationwide study showing that females killed with firearms, almost 2/3 of those females were killed by their intimate partners. HB 243 would dramatically lower the bar for those who carry a concealed handgun in Idaho to include domestic violence perpetrators who've been convicted of assault cases and abusive boyfriends who have current protection orders filed against them by their abused girlfriend. Under Idaho law, a person convicted of a violent misdemeanor is not eligible for a concealed carry permit for 3 years. Under HB 243, even a domestic violence perpetrator could legally carry a concealed handgun immediately after the disposition of their latest charge. Of utmost concern to us is the safety of the victims in these situations. We know that the level of dangerousness and lethality, contrary to popular belief, often increases when victims and perpetrators are involved with the criminal justice system. When involved with the criminal justice system, domestic violence perpetrators lose the power and control over their victim, and when that power and control is lessened, it is then that a domestic violence perpetrator becomes more dangerous. One of the most dangerous times for any victim of domestic violence is when perpetrators have been arrested and faced punishment for their crime, as well as when a victim has sought an order of protection. HB 243 also leaves a significant concerning gap in relation to domestic violence protection orders. Under HB 243, it states that if an individual is subject to a protection order that restrains the person from harassing, stalking, or threatening an intimate partner of the person or child of the intimate partner. The use of intimate partner is concerning to us as it creates a significant gap for individuals who are dating and in an abusive relationship. Under current Idaho law, the Domestic Violence Crime Prevention Act, a clear distinction is made to include dating partners in the list of individuals who are protected. So I would reference you to 393603, the Domestic Violence Crime Prevention Act, which includes a definition of dating partners, which says that a dating relationships for the purpose of this chapter is defined as a social relationship of a romantic nature, and then lists those 3 criteria. Without this same inclusion of dating partners in the list of individuals subject to a current protection order, abusive boyfriends, considered in a dating relationship, could apply for and receive a concealed weapons permit. We know, in fact, that many domestic violence incidents are between dating partners, not between spouses. In fact, the 2013 Crimes Against Person data by the Idaho State Police shows that the largest number of domestic violence incidents involve boyfriends and girlfriends, not spouses. Our final concern is the one that was raised by Representative Wintrow in the concealed permit while in city limits and not outside the city limits. We know that domestic violence perpetrators often move their victims to very rural and remote areas, including many of the areas in Idaho. Without this provision being in place, we fear for the safety of those victims. The Idaho Coalition takes a firm stand against 243 with obvious concerns for the safety of the nearly 12,000 victims of domestic violence that receive services in our state every year. I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry I didn't catch your last name, ma'am.
You didn't pronounce it because it's hard. It's Landheist.
Ms. Landheist.
Thank you.
Ms. Landheist, I wanted to ask you, the individuals who are perpetrating domestic violence, do they tend to be people who are mentally ill? Are they people who are criminals? Or otherwise, would they typically be a normal law-abiding citizen?
They would typically be a normal law-abiding citizen. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I should have asked for permission. May I have permission?
Go ahead.
Thank you. They typically are law-abiding citizen, and one of the big myths that's out there regarding domestic violence is that they are people who are mentally ill, that people who are criminals, when in actuality it's your everyday person. So we know that 1 in 4 women will be a victim of domestic violence, and they're victims by people who are not what people would want to think are crazy or mentally ill or extremely violent.
Other questions? Mr. Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Landheist. Are there provisions now covering the dating partner, and was that removed with this bill?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
There weren't provisions in the current bill. There's a gap between what we have in the law regarding dating violence and the protection order, civil protection order statute, where that language is included.
Thank you.
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Landheist. So your concern is around 60% of the homicides that were committed, domestic violence homicides, involves a firearm. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Landheist. So would you have comfort level with this legislation if we were to put some provisions in there that if someone had a violent misdemeanor or something like that, that they would not be allowed to obtain a permit?
Mr. Chair. I think we'd be more comfortable with that. I think we would still stand in opposition to the total overall bill without seeing how that moves forward. What happens sometimes is people say convictions of certain misdemeanors. What we know is that most domestic violence perpetrators never get convicted of their crime. And so instead what happens when they are originally charged with a violent misdemeanor, that gets pled out in court to disturbing the peace. So it would never even hit the threshold where they would need an added provision. Does that make sense?
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Landheist. Is there something, this is an area that you work in day in and day out, an area that I'm very concerned about. So is there some language we could put in this legislation that would be able to solve your problem and at the same time move the legislation forward?
Ms. Landheist.
I don't know that I have the answer to that right now, but we could absolutely consult with our attorneys and look into that and provide that to you if you would be interested in that.
I would be. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mitchell Jensen, followed by Russ Mears. We're running out of time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I will be brief. My name is Mitchell Jensen. I am the treasurer of the Idaho Federation of College Republicans, and I am here to testify on behalf of myself and the IDFCR today. We have several issues with the bill, House Bill 243. It is our understanding that the bill would take away the rights of our elected officials to exercise their Second Amendment rights without a permit. As previous testimony stated, that could include up to 30,000 people in the state of Idaho. We oppose any measure that would take away the Second Amendment rights of any individual in Idaho, and we feel that this is a step in the wrong direction. The IDFCR supports Second Amendment rights, including those of our elected officials, and we would ask that the committee vote against this bill. There are also other issues with the bill. It seems that what the proponents of the bill are focusing on is clarification in Idaho code. We're not necessarily opposed to Idaho clarification of the code, but we would ask your consideration on other important legislation, namely House Bill 89, to go forward with that. We don't think that this bill is perhaps the best way to go, and it is a step in the wrong direction as far as Second Amendment rights. So with that, I would open myself up to any questions.
Other questions? Thank you. Russ Mears, followed by Dan Roberts.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Russ Smers. I am the coordinator for the Conservative Leadership Council in Idaho that consists of 14 Tea Parties and 10 other liberty organizations such as the Oath Keepers, the 143 Militia, 912 Idaho. We are opposed to this bill. Each year we take a survey of our almost 20,000 members combined, and every year it comes up with what is the most important to you, and one of the most important things to our leadership group and council is the protection of the Second Amendment. We consider constitutional carry critical in Idaho and in this country, and we stand opposed to 243. I stand for questions.
Other questions? Thank you. Dan Roberts.
Mr. Chairman,
I can't read. McKay.
Anderson.
Okay. You say so.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dan Roberts. I'm from Eastern Idaho. Came over there specifically to address this committee. Although I stand here alone today, I hold the petitions of over 500 East Idahoans who are in favor of moving us closer to constitutional carry, if actually are totally in favor of constitutional carry. I understand that the Constitution does allow from the 1978 amendment that we can keep what's the word, regulate. Thank you. We can regulate, but just because we have the right doesn't mean we should. I think legislative discretion that the people invested into the legislature is to do exactly what we have done in the past, and that is to determine who are violators of individual rights and to keep guns away from those people. And I hope that we can continue to do that in the future. This morning, as we got up, I have two boys here that we homeschool. And as I rolled around in bed contemplating to get up, I heard their voices. And excited, not only to make a trip to Boise, but to stand up for what they believe, as we've tried to instill in them the inherent rights of people. This is what we're talking about. I want to be able to pass my guns down to my boys and be able to have them use, as law-abiding citizens within this state, the right to conceal those for their protection of themselves, their family, and their property. And I hope that you will listen to, I don't understand how the sponsors of this bill can say that this bill doesn't expand rights. It absolutely does expand some rights, and it also at the same time abrogates rights of those 30,000 some people. We should be leading the way in Idaho. We couldn't preempt Vermont. We've got 4 others in front of us. Let's do something that's good for Idaho, good for the citizens, and as Mr. Wright said, is reasonable and ethical and right. And I stand for questions.
Are there questions? Representative Nielsen?
Oh, excuse me. Is Dan Roberts?
Yes, it is.
Appreciate you coming all the way over here. That's a fur piece to run in one morning. But anyhow, your group, and you've got 500 signatures or so, believe in the Second Amendment. Is that not correct? That's what you stated?
Mr. Chairman,
Roberts?
yes, we do believe in Second Amendment.
May I ask you this question? Then according to Article 6, where it states this, and I'll quote or read it, "The Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land." Now the word pursuance is really important here. And I've got a dictionary my wife bought me, the 1828 or something like that, Noah Webster. And pursuance means this: to proceed along, follow, or continue with a specified course. And that means how this Constitution is going. So with that in mind, you're suggesting that this is the supreme law of the land, and your group is saying that we should follow without question the Constitution of the United States. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman. Yes. Yes, I do. But we also believe that there is a superior law to the Constitution, and that is the law of God, which is in the bosom of every man, woman, and child, to be able to protect their rights. The Constitution, I think, has a broader meaning. I think that we do have, in Heller versus D.C., that there is an individual right. I think that's why we're seeing a lot of these states moving towards that, and a lot of that debate being ended. But yes, absolutely. These are inherent rights. They're rights vouchsafed in the Constitution, and I believe our statehood is dependent upon accepting the Constitution as the supreme law of the land.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Nielsen.
Mr. Roberts, what you're stating to me then is this, if I could say it properly, is that those rights need to be protected at all costs, and this bill does not follow that course. Is that what you're telling me?
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My personal belief, and I think I could be wrong, maybe John Locke said this, is that no law that is in opposition to a natural right is a law at all, and has no validity. And although we can pass or try to regulate something that is an inherent right, it's an immoral act by a not understanding body, a body that doesn't understand natural rights and is operating outside of its scope.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Nielsen.
Just a comment. Cicero.
You can comment when we debate the bill.
Okay.
Further questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
McKay Anderson, followed by, I think it's Anthony Depew. Get that anywhere near right?
Yes, despite the bad handwriting, huh?
Well, it is an issue.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is McKay Anderson, as the chairman stated. Come over this morning from Shelley, Idaho. Just wanted to be heard on this issue for myself and for those that I know and I talk to who we oppose this bill. We believe, as has been mentioned by several people, that we have the right to our life. We have the right to defend ourselves. And that this is the wrong direction, that's an absolute right, and we should be able to exercise it. That good government will support us to exercise our right to defend ourselves without their permission. And that's the direction that I and those that I know and talk to think that this body should go.
Other questions? Representative Nielsen.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't pay attention to catch your name, but
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson. What you're basically saying is then that Well, I'll phase the question this way. This particular bill is a bringing together many aspects of the laws in the state of Idaho as currently written, and it's trying to make more sense out of it in my mind and correct different avenues. And you're stating that even with trying to do this, the general direction of this bill is wrong?
Mr. Anderson? Mr. Chairman? Yes, sir, I believe that's right. Much ado was made about definitions of concealed or open carry, or laying out the order of operations for individuals to be able to have be supported and have an ability to defend their lives. And it seems to me that it would be simpler and better, the right direction for people that have that natural right. Shouldn't need to go through all that. We shouldn't need to have to concern ourselves, is it concealed or is it not? Just the man has the right to defend himself.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you, sir. Anthony? Seth Rosequist will be next. Please be as brief as you can.
Yes, thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Quickly, Representative Wintro, of all the information or communication that I've submitted to any committee about gun legislation, you and Representative Young and Levitt are the only ones that have taken time to reply, and I just wanted to say that I'm grateful for that. Thank you. Even though we stand fundamentally opposed on the issue, you did take the time to reply, and I appreciate that. My issue with House Bill 243 and why I stand opposed to it is that it perpetuates abject absurdities in the code as it exists and the changes that would be made if it were passed. Namely, the right to carry firearms by legally eligible citizens is already affirmed by the state of Idaho through the vehicle of open carry. And so, as a citizen, if I were open carrying a firearm and I did not have a permit, if I were to take a clipboard or a book or a laptop, or for my jacket to fall over my weapon, now, by the statutes as they're written, I am criminally on the hook for a misdemeanor. That's abjectly absurd. If the right to carry is fundamentally upheld by the state of Idaho, why then does it make a difference if something falls to cover that weapon? Same person, same outfit, same weapon, one minor distinction. It's abjectly absurd. Representative Wintro brought up the absurdity of a geographical boundary. If I cross a street with my weapon concealed, I'm fine. But if I turn around and I cross over that same street, I'm now on the hook for a misdemeanor. It's abjectly absurd. The provisions that talk about concealment within a vehicle, if I stand outside of my vehicle, I'm fine. But if I get inside of my vehicle and the armrest covers my weapon, now I'm on the hook for a misdemeanor. The only way that I can stay legal is to unholster that weapon and put it in plain sight. And what kind of sense does that make? The permit process in and of itself does not deter the criminally minded or the mentally insufficient from procuring, possessing, owning, or carrying firearms. So what sense does it make then to ask someone else who already has the legal right to open carry to then submit to the permit process to stay legal to concealed carry? I don't think anybody's against permits. I don't think anybody's against training. But what we need to do is enact common sense legislation. There was common sense legislation permitted in House Bill 89. Someone was quoted as saying that it was poorly worded, and maybe that's the case. But House Bill 243 was a perfect opportunity to combine common sense legislation with a rewrite of the statutes as they exist. And for that reason, I stand opposed to House Bill 243.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Greg. How you doing? This is Michael Emery with TVOI News, and we're standing here with Greg Pruett. And Greg, what was your take on this House bill?
Well, it looks like, for the most part, the citizens that have spoken out today have spoken out against House Bill 243 for a variety of reasons. And I think, one of the things, Representative Crane, one of his first questions was, well, are you just opposing this because we didn't get House Bill 89 a hearing? And to me, that was kind of insulting to the citizens of Idaho. we look at all these bills, we look at each one of them individually and determine, is this constitutional, or are we moving in the right direction? And House Bill 243 doesn't do that.
Well, I also watched the NRA just come in there, and it almost seemed like they were stalling for time because there were so many people that did not get to talk, droves of them, and I guess we have to reconvene at 3 o'clock because of it.
Yeah, and it definitely, the comments and questions seem to go a lot longer than even the chairman had expected with the NRA, from Representative Wintrow and some others. So a lot of people haven't got to be heard yet. They are going to reconvene at 3:30, so hopefully more citizens will get to be heard. It's going to be a lot harder for them, though, to come back, at that time. And so I don't know if that's by design or not. But.
Well, I think that the power of the press and the power of the internet has spoken today, don't you think?
Yeah, overwhelmingly, the support is moving in the direction of constitutional carry. And one important testimony that Anthony DePune brought up was that they had a chance with House Bill 243 to write constitutional carry in there. They rewrote the code. Well, okay, rewrite constitutional carry in there. They didn't do that. They had that opportunity, and they didn't do that. And Mr. Moore from the NRA said, I support constitutional carry. Well, why didn't you write that as part of the rewrite in your bill? And then we could have all supported it and got on board. But there's some other issues in that bill that need to be addressed as well. So.
Sounds to me like that they are just trying to play every tactic they can to stall it. And they don't want any common sense, even if they say they do. And this is my take. I don't know. Is that right?
Yeah. And the Idaho Constitution requires that our legislators take, when they're taking instruction on what to be done, they take that from Idaho citizens. Well, with all due respect, the NRA lobbyist is from Alabama. And so, while we would certainly love to have their support and backing constitutional carry, there's thousands of Idaho citizens that want to see constitutional carry, and they're not being heard. They've been pushed aside in favor of whatever this ad hoc gun committee came up with. And to me, that's a big issue.
It sounds to me like and I've seen this happen before with the Hughes Amendment back in 86 with the machine gun ruling. They said, oh, who cares about the machine gun rules at the last minute of sessions, and they had something to stuff in there with pork. And that's what they do. And anyways, well, I want to thank you for coming up here, Craig.
No, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the coverage you guys do. And we've got to get more Idaho citizens. The conservatives in Idaho really, here at the State House, are a minority, even more of a minority than the Democrats, because there's very few conservatives here that are willing to stand up, buck leadership, and take charge of what the Idaho citizens are trying to do. And so we've got to get that conservative voice out there, and I appreciate all the work you guys have done to do that.
Appreciate that. Failure of journalism is why we're here, folks. Get involved. Do something about it, because really, it's your future and your children's future. And Greg, thank you so much for doing all you do.
Appreciate it.
TVOI News here at the Capitol.